Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, good whatever time it is, wherever you happen to be in this amazing planet of ours. I'm Malcolm Hawker. I'm the host of the CDO Matters Podcast. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Happy New Year. We're still recording this in 2024, but by the time you see this, it will be 2025. I hope the best for you and your friends and your family in this year before us. I think it's going to be an exciting year. I am extremely optimistic. I can't wait to see how things unfold in 2025, and I wish you and your family the best. Today on the podcast, we are going to talk about how to re-envision your organization for success with AI. And I can't think of a person better suited to join me in this conversation. Today, I'm joined by Katharine Shaw Paffett. She is the cross-solution regional lead for UK and Ireland with Avanade. If you don't know Avanade, they are a global consulting partner. They're a joint ventureship between Microsoft and Accenture, so two pretty well-known names in the space. Katharine has deep experience across a number of consulting firms, including Accenture and E&Y. Was with Microsoft for 4 years, so comes at her knowledge honestly in this space. And I couldn't be more thrilled. Katharine, thank you for being here today.
Such a pleasure, Malcolm. And I do listen to CDO Matters quite often on the elliptical when I'm at the gym. So it's just fantastic to actually be part of this story today. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm tickled that you are here. I knew that you had done that. You had told me, because when we had met in London the first time, I was rather humbled in hearing that you listened to me on your elliptical. So tell us a little bit about your role. What does it mean to be a cross-solution AI lead for UK and Ireland with Avanade? What do you do, and how are you interacting with Avanade's clients?
Fantastic question. So I was brought in with a very, very clear mandate to be very much across the solution areas or across the Microsoft stack and really create value for our clients right through all of the technological capabilities that Avanade can offer. We're obviously very much aligned to Microsoft. So we're 20% owned by Microsoft, and that means we're also aligned to Microsoft in terms of our technology stack. So we have infrastructure, we have application development, we have modern work. So, enter Copilot there. We have business applications. So, the whole plethora of Power Platform capabilities, which is also very, very exciting right now in terms of what you can now do as a citizen analyst or citizen developer. And we have data and AI as well. And I work across all of these capabilities together with my colleagues every single day to create solutions that can, we hope, help our clients' business that often involve AI. So I'm doing that on a day-to-day basis. I work, obviously, one of the advantages of AI right now is that you can really use it to leverage your proprietary data, which can release even more of a competitive advantage. So I work on a day-to-day basis, probably the most with our data and AI team, and then with our modern work team on, for instance, custom co-pilots for our clients. So a lot of our clients wanted to first kind of familiarize themselves with generative AI with a kind of off-the-shelf solution like M365 Copilot. Then they decided to connect it to their processes like Jira, ServiceNow, connect it more to their own data to see those initial synergies, and then create a custom Copilot maybe for a particular process or a particular domain specific or industry specific use case. So that's what I'm doing on a very high level day to day. And I'm industry agnostic right now. So I'm working quite a lot. My background is financial services. So I'm working a lot with our financial services team, but also more recently with our healthcare team, which I find absolutely fascinating.
So why I'm particularly excited to talk to you is because of all those other areas outside of the data world that you mentioned. Data folks like us tend to be, I wish we weren't, but we tend to be a little insular. We tend to be a little insular in our worlds. And yes, we work with our business customers. Of course we do. But having that kind of that cross enterprise view, particularly what you called kind of the modern workplace, which kind of I assume is kind of, the organizational impacts, more of the HR centric impacts. How do you have a well-trained workforce? How do you have an engaged workforce and motivated and a productive workforce? I'm interested to talk about that. Also interested to talk about how these co-pilots are plugging into business applications like old school CRMs and ERPs and the dynamics of the world. Love to get into that. So this is gonna be a great conversation. I'm excited about this. In the last year, 2 years, since ChatGPT exploded, I think the number one theme that I've been hearing with the CDOs that I talk to every day is this idea of being more AI ready. Now, of course, I come at this a little bit more from the data and AI side. But what are you seeing in the market in terms of organizations becoming and getting more AI ready? What are organizations like standing up kind of AI task forces, or are data and analytics teams driving these, or are they more cross-functional? What are you seeing in around this idea of AI readiness?
That's a fantastic question. I think that will be a theme kind of throughout our call. As we dive deeper later on into topics as well, like responsible AI. I was at Data IQ, the Data IQ Leadership Summit this week, and one of the takeaways for me was, we've got such an opportunity right now to create competitive advantage in a totally different way. And what is competitive advantage in the data world? It's, I guess, very much in the proprietary data, because it's your unique insights that you know about your industry that no one else knows. And with GenAI, obviously, you can really conjure up those unique insights a lot faster. You've got better access to them if they were in. Obviously, GenAI's got a fantastic affinity for unstructured data. So I read a statistic a while ago that so far, before we actually had that shift to more transformative technology like generative AI a couple of years ago, so far we can actually only really leverage 10% of our data, because that was the structured data. And now we can actually, when we talk a little bit more about multimodality later on, we can use AI to actually interpret a plethora of unstructured data, which obviously opens up huge amounts of possibilities just to actually query, our proprietary data in a much faster way. So we have insights about our clients a lot faster, and we can shift from that minimum viable product much more to that minimum lovable product, which I think a lot of our consumers are going to be expecting going forward. Key considerations, obviously, you'll be able to tell me better than most that data quality is really one of the blockers that I think was 46% of CDOs say is really blocking them from realizing their AI ambition, as Gartner would call it. And you're only really going to be able to leverage the power of LLMs and SLMs, if you've actually got your organization can actually train those proprietary data sets for those models. Before actually, tailoring and using kind of targeted prompt engineering to really maximize that. Key considerations, think about enterprise grade infrastructure and security. So I think right now it's really a case of shifting left with security right across the software development lifecycle. Security should really be in from the start, because as we've seen these advances in technology with AI, that really exceed Moore's law. We've also seen advances in attacks, because that gives them a whole different tool set as well. So I would say considerations, enterprise grade infrastructure and security. So obviously consider migrating to the cloud if you're not there. Data readiness. A lot of our clients, they've got to kind of they've got to think build versus buy now. And, we all have relatively flat headcounts. So we can't necessarily have a master data management department, for instance. We can't necessarily have a whole department that's labeling the data. I think we need to think very strategically about independent software vendors like yourself, like other ISVs who can actually help us get that data house in order so that we're in the best possible position to really maximize the competitive advantage that we have in our data. Skilling. So we have our School of AI program, for instance, that we've also deployed at quite a number of our clients. So I guess the learnings that we've used, that we've learned ourselves, we're now branching out to our clients with. Organizational culture, obviously, and then ethical and legal considerations. So those are kind of my top of mind, I guess, when it comes to getting your organization to be AI ready. I think also certainly at quite a few of our clients, they have quite large SharePoint depositories and repositories, and it's also now a case of how can I use, for instance, retrieval augmented generation to actually put that plethora of unstructured data into something a lot more structured, so I can actually start pulling insights in a much more refined way.
Wow. Okay. So there's a lot to pull out there. The first nugget for me as a data person was something that I've shared often in this podcast, which is the idea that there's kind of a Pareto principle in here, in that 80% of the data out there floating around is largely unstructured and unmonetized, unvalued, unactioned, just sitting collecting digital dust. And that is one idea of how to become more AI ready, is how do we start to automatically classify or put that data into specific taxonomy so that we can understand what's there and apply things like data quality rules to it, so that we avoid what happened to Air Canada. If everybody knows the Air Canada case where a chatbot gave the wrong information, they got sued. It was a mess. So that's one, is getting our arms around unstructured data. I heard a lot there around infrastructure and tools. Couldn't agree more. One thing though, before we go off this topic, of the three kind of areas where these initiatives could be getting kind of initiated by, right? Are these larger scale AI programs or initiatives? Are they being driven out of the data and AI team, or is it more on the business application side where people want to make their ERP more efficient? Are these cross-functional teams, or are you seeing this more maybe even at a board level, where a board is saying, "Hey, go do this, go figure out AI and make it happen"? Where are these programs? Where's the genesis for these programs happening in organizations?
Actually depends a little bit, and it depends on the size of the organization. I hate to give such a diplomatic answer like this, but it's very much dependent on the organization. I met with a board this week, and we were talking very, very specifically about use cases that we thought could benefit from transformative technologies and then would actually benefit the business. If it's a slightly larger company, then it might be coming much more from, as you say, the data side of the house. But it's a mix, and I think also that's partly the point. Since we've had this shift 2 years ago, nearly now, I thought. There was an executive from Vodafone at Big Data London where we both were, and he made a point. He just said GenAI has really given us a carrot for data management. So he said that GDPR was kind of a push, but GenAI is really that carrot, which has opened up those board level discussions and really put it on a board level as well.
And well, so another message that I've been giving here through previous podcasts and through LinkedIn posts and you name it. If you're and this is my editorial perspective, if you're a CDO and you're kind of waiting for somebody to ask you for an AI-driven solution, I'm not sure that's the right approach. I would be more on the offensive here as a CDO. I would be taking the bull by the horns and saying, okay, what can I do in order to start understanding this technology, integrating this technology, operationalizing it across the organization? I would be going on the offensive with AI, because sitting back and waiting is, I would suggest, not a great career choice. Anyway, let's dovetail into more in the technology stuff, because this is, I think, an area where you and I can get really excited and fall down a couple of really deep rabbit holes. Go ahead.
I had one other point that a lot of our clients are now utilizing Microsoft Fabric, which again, I think if you can simplify your data integration across the clouds, that is really just a fantastic foundation for your AI journey.
I am a believer. I have been a believer since late 2019 when we started talking about the fabric at Gartner. I think Microsoft is head and shoulders above others, but I would argue it's very much a V1 product, but you got to start somewhere. And it is still transformative even as a V1, I would argue. So I'm with you. Totally bullish on the fabric, totally bullish on the ability to use a single kind of operating pane, as it were, to initiate any sort of jobs, whether it's a Spark job, whether it's just a classic pipeline, whether it's a SQL statement, and being able to hit data anywhere. I mean, that in and of itself, one place to access data across multiple infrastructures, including AWS and GCP, I think is a game changer. Totally with you on the fabric. Okay, so that's a good segue into technology. Where do you kind of see things heading for the next 6 months to a year? We're now into 2025, where it's 2+ years since ChatGPT kind of took the market by storm. Where do you see things heading? Are we doing more RAG, retrieval augmented generation? Are we doing more small model development? You mentioned leveraging internal data sources within some of these models. What do you see for the next few months and years?
So just to put a disclaimer on this is before Microsoft Ignite. So let's hope that the world hasn't totally changed when this episode gets released. But I would still argue that there are some underlying trends that I think will just get stronger and more refined and more developed going into 2025. We are obviously in a market that outpaces Moore's law. So Moore said the technological progression would double every couple of years. Satya Nadella said a while ago that AI's progression doubles every 6 months. If I think about, so I would say that a strategic trajectory for me right now is 6 months in tech.
Got it. Okay.
Although it normally be 3 to 5 years, but for me, strategic could also be just 6 months right now. What do I see coming? I think AI will be increasingly more multimodal. We'll have a plethora of different models to explore, I think, going into FY25, into 2025. Obviously, agentic AI, advanced connectivity, and then even more of a stringent emphasis on, I guess, the devil being in the data management. So that's good news for CDOs everywhere. Just to touch on multimodality, first of all, obviously, we mentioned the kind of affinity that generative AI has for unstructured data. And now you can feed ChatGPT not just with text, you can feed it with sounds, you can feed it with videos, you can feed it with pictures. I think those multimodal capabilities, particularly now we've got the O models now, so GPT-4o, for instance, will advance. I saw a use case at one of our clients the other day where it was a manufacturer actually, and we'd made a chat interface for them. And they can actually feed this interface now the sound the machine is making, and then our agents. So we've created an agentic workflow there. Obviously, with agentic AI, they can actually act autonomously now. They've all been trained on different data sets, so they can come up with an action and a judgment. So we fed in the sound the machine was making. I don't know, click, click, click. And then all of the agents were working away, figuring out what was wrong there. Is it rusty? Why is it making that noise? And I think multimodality will just continue to just absolutely amaze us next year. On the multimodal front, what am I excited about? Small language models. I'm really excited. I mean, we just had an announcement from Microsoft a couple of days ago about industry-specific small language models. But I'm very excited about small language models, particularly because some of our clients, small mid-market, you don't have to use GPT-4 to just summarize or classify now. You can use one of the Phi-3 models. So we can make quite strategic cost decisions now going forward based on which model we will choose. So maybe we use GPT-4 for a much more complex reasoning task, but then we can utilize the small language models for something a lot simpler. Their code bases are smaller, so they're supposed to be less vulnerable to attack. You can use them on devices with limited processing power. I recently started a series called Imagine What You Will Do with AI, hosted by Avanade, UK and Ireland. And I was interviewing, obviously I interviewed you on one of the episodes, but I also interviewed a global black belt at Microsoft, an AI global black belt, Nir, and he was saying how potentially you could leverage small language models in Formula One, for instance, very effectively, because they're very responsive and you don't really have the luxury of having that latency to upload everything onto the cloud when they're going so fast, but you still need to pull the data from the cars and know what's happening. So potentially you could leverage a small language model there, for instance. So that was one of the most interesting use cases I've seen so far. But as I said, for much more simpler tasks like just classification, summarization, I think we'll just be a lot more deliberate about which model we use next year. Obviously, we've got a plethora of open source models, which opens up a lot of freedom. And we've got the O1 models now that have, because of the reinforcement learning, have cognitive capabilities. So I think we will just have a plethora of different models to play with next year. I touched upon agentic AI already. We are, for instance, working with Mangata, a satellite communications company. And this is also my next point around advanced connectivity. We're working on agentic AI with them, for instance. If we go on to the next trend that I'm seeing, advanced connectivity. I was reading the other day, actually, only 70 to 80% of use cases are actually possible with the technology that we have now. So we need to think a little bit more about our new digital backbone. So not just leveraging our traditional Wi-Fi, but leveraging 5G, leveraging low Earth orbit satellites, for instance, edge computing, satellite connectivity in general. So as I said, we've partnered up with Mangata, and we're building edge-based solutions with them, for instance, for locations where they would have bandwidth issues. And then potentially if you build an agentic workflow into that, then an agent could, obviously autonomously because it's an agent, but the agent could make the decision which device should I give the bandwidth to if I need to prioritize bandwidth. So I think agentic AI, advanced connectivity will also play a huge role next year. And then lastly, just data. I think it's so important. And we still haven't, I see that every day, we still haven't done everything that we need to do with our data in our organizations to really get it AI ready. So I think that will be paramount. As our executive from Vodafone said at Big Data World, we've now really got a carrot to actually get our data house in order.
And it's a massive carrot. There are people out there talking about the AI bubble bursting, and I find that kind of humorous, right? And I don't mean that in a negative way and a judgmental way, but there's a lot of people saying that this is very similar to 2008, 9, right? Around I'm getting my decades mixed up. I'm old, but around the kind of the internet.com implosion, which would have been actually 1999, 2000, 2001, and they're saying, well, this is the same situation, and I just have a hard time believing that for a lot of different reasons. Now, I mean, it's sure a lot of startups are going to go broke. Of course, a lot of startups go broke because startups go broke. That's what they do. They're high risk, high return, and a lot of them will be culled out of the market. But I have a hard time thinking that there isn't meat on this bone, right? There isn't like incredible transformative value. And what you're seeing in the market, Katharine, is that, companies are running towards this stuff and are making strategic investments in this. So what do you think when you hear people, what's your response to somebody saying, well, the AI bubble is going to burst? How do you respond to that?
So first point from my side, you were mentioning startups and startups going bust. I thought Sam Altman, he came up with this phrase about startups wearing a T-shirt, OpenAI killed my startup. And he said the startups that base their technology on what is available now they'll be wearing that t-shirt in 6 months' time. The startups that are really looking around the corner and building their solutions around what will be available are the ones that are definitely not going to be wearing that t-shirt. I don't think the bubble is going to burst. I think we've got a fantastic opportunity here. And I also think we've got to a point. I remember being on a panel a couple of years ago at the Mobile World Congress called Can Anything Be Connected? And the kind of the essay question was, can anything be connected? And should anything or everything be connected? And one of my kind of, I guess, arguments or points during this panel was that we've got to a point in terms of kind of mega trends, in terms of climate change, in terms of chronic disease, in terms of technological progression, in terms of digital debt, we can't actually deal with the amount of traffic that we get. It's just surpassed our ability to actually deal with it. I would argue this technology and this shift that we've seen, paradigm shift as well as platform shift that we've seen over the last couple of years is actually needed from an evolutionary perspective. So no, I don't think it's going to explode. And I think it comes at the right time.
Totally agree. There's a little bit of an irony embedded in what you just shared, in that I think there is so much untapped value out there. For example, in the 80% of data that is, completely unstructured, like all this data sitting in data centers that, by the way, is consuming scarce energy. But that aside, you've got all this data out there that is largely just collecting dust. And we've been unable to monetize it, unable to govern it, unable to analyze it because our systems just don't operate at that scale. We historically, they have not. But along comes AI, and AI does scale really well. Yes, it consumes energy to do it, but the idea, like using AI to drive value that AI can then operationalize, which that's kind of the irony, right? Is that to kind of solve some of these bigger problems, I think we're going to need to use AI to be able to govern. Here's an example: to be able to govern AI and to be able to and we're going to get into this in responsible AI next. But to be able to effectively govern it, you're going to have to use AI because that's the only way that you're going to be able to execute any of these programs at scale. So I find there a little bit of an irony there, but I think it's okay because the value is going to be truly transformative. I touched on responsible AI. In all of the conferences that I've gone to over the last 2 years since the explosion of ChatGPT, one of the bigger themes has been the idea of what data people like me call AI governance. Right? Historically, governance defined the policies and procedures of what you can and can't do with data, what you should and what you shouldn't do with data. It touches kind of on the idea of bias. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But what I'm hearing a lot in the data world, at the very least, is a lot of platitudes and a lot of frameworks. And don't get me wrong, I like frameworks. So there are people saying, hey, here are the things you need to do in order to do AI the right way. And one of those things you need to do is you need to be responsible. But I'll be honest and tell you, Katharine, I'm not entirely sure what that means. I mean, I know what it means from a definitional perspective, but when it comes to operationalizing this, I see a lot of challenges here because I don't know how do you quantify the idea of responsibility? What are you seeing your clients do? What are you seeing your clients implement, and how are you guiding them in this journey?
Fantastic question, and I definitely don't have all of the answers here. I think, first of all, kind of what does responsible AI mean for me, and why is it so important? We've just talked about the capabilities of this technology and paradigm shift we've seen since it was created. And I think when you're dealing with a technology at this scale, with these capabilities, it's got the ability to exclude, and it's also got the ability to be very, very harmful. So it's very, very very, very important that we get this right. And you did mention frameworks, but I do think it's important to have a kind of responsible AI framework with principles that you can live through tooling and actions from the start. Before I quickly dive into that, I actually wrote this down. I saw a very interesting quote from Stephen Hawking, And he said, I wrote this down. He said, the real risk with AI isn't malice, but competence. A super intelligent AI will be extremely good at accomplishing its goals. And if those goals aren't aligned with ours, we are in trouble. So particularly when we think about next year and the trends I just alluded to with regard to agentic AI, when AI can actually be very much autonomous and act autonomously in that kind of agentic framework and take an action for us, it's really paramount that the goals are aligned. A lot of our clients, especially our I was talking to a client the other day, and they built a responsible AI framework up from the start. So very much like Microsoft. Microsoft has, for instance, they've got in their responsible AI principles, they've got inclusivity, for instance, privacy and security, transparency, to name a few. And this client actually approached it very, very similar, that they built up their principles in a framework, and then actually started to utilize some of our tooling. So we've got our responsible AI, our AI control tower, for instance. So every use case, you feed through every single use case that includes AI that you're working on. It will grade it in terms of low, medium, and high risk. It will look for the danger signs, for instance, and it will also totally align with your organizational reporting. So it's constantly reporting on the potential risks that it sees in the use cases we're producing. And that actually allows us, we use it at Avanade as well, allows us to have a very, actionable governance, and also allows us to really live our principles. I can just touch upon a little bit as well, because we're very much aligned also to Microsoft's responsible AI principles. Do you know how they came to be?
No.
So Microsoft, I think the first draft came out in 2019 for their responsible AI principles, but they actually went to Rome. Just before the pandemic kicked off, they went to Rome. They visited the Pope together with FAO and IBM, and actually 3 Abrahamic religious leaders, and actually signed a covenant called the Rome Call for AI Ethics, and actually talked through with the Pope and the other religious leaders about AI, its ramifications for society, and actually how to govern it. So that, I think, leads on to our next topic of AI being a social cement. But have I answered your questions with regard to responsible AI?
Yes, at a high level, and I think for where we are as an industry, I think totally and completely appropriate, because I don't think anybody's got all the answers yet. By the way, I didn't mean to cast aspersions on frameworks. I love frameworks; they're needed and they're necessary. My challenge to the industry, and this is to everybody, is to go to the next step, which is how do I implement this as a data person? How do I implement these rules? And you started to touch on them. Step one is to actually define what the rules would be. Define the utility functions, as it were, of what we expect these systems to do. I'm fascinated by the whole Pope thing and the Rome thing. I need to do a little bit more research there. But we're on a journey here. I don't think anybody has all the answers of day one. The Hawking quote was really interesting because, I think what he touches on is the idea of unintended consequences, right? I mean, and we see unintended consequences every day. An example would be microplastics, right? Plastics have revolutionized how we kind of store and manage, even things like food and water. And I think you could argue that plastics have been a huge driver of limiting starvation, even and helping developing economies to prosper more. But a consequence of that is garbage, right? And I think what AI will do is that we will find unintended consequences much faster, right? Because the AI will be out there doing its thing, and it'll be solving these problems that we tell it to go solve. But what we'll learn along the way is, oh wow, we didn't program in that it shouldn't, do these things, because we never even considered those things because we're merely human. We didn't even consider them. So I think a lot of this will be, a lot of the responsible AI will be reactionary, unfortunately.
I think so too, and I think if I'm putting on my kind of my CDO hat and thinking about Microsoft's responsible AI principles and it's some of the frameworks we've built up at our clients, particularly that inclusiveness pillar really sticks out. I think the CDOs really have a huge imperative to make sure that the applications we're building are trained on a wide range of data sets, for instance. So I heard something the other day about a car manufacturer, for instance, and they built a solution where you could unlock your car door just by putting your hand in front of the sensor, but they'd only trained that those models in a particular part of the world on a very particular demographic. So the only people who could open those car doors were white men who were 45 years old. So I wouldn't have been able to open the car door, for instance, because they hadn't thought, they'd thought about who is in the room, but they hadn't thought who is not in the room. And I think the CDO's responsibility and mandate just to make sure that we have very inclusive data when we're building our applications and when we're training our models will be paramount in terms of responsible AI. I think they have such a pivotal role there.
Yep, that's going to be an interesting one because I think often we will be tasked to try to create the data that may not be there. Right. If we don't have data for whatever reason we don't have the data. In the case that you mentioned, that's just, I wouldn't say malpractice. That's too strong a word. That's an error of omission. Right. But in the case of situations where we just don't have data, but we probably should, in order to ensure things like inclusivity. Right. I think we'll have to probably make it, right? We'll have to synthesize this data, which is interesting. Separate podcast, maybe just talk about synthetic data and how to actually make it. And how would you make data for, smaller hands or different demographic hands? I just such a fascinating topic.
I mean, look at Big Data World. Look how many independent software vendors there were at that trade fair who were producing synthetic data, for instance.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But even synthetic data needs something to be synthesized from.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's anonymized and it's genericized, but it's still being synthesized from something. So here we get to a point where, well, maybe we could use AI to do that. Right? We could use AI to synthesize the data of a different demographic hand. Oh boy. There's such big problems. Boy, it's a good time to be in data, though. I'll tell you, because this is certainly a time of
you've got your
great job security.
You really have.
We've got our hands full of all shapes and sizes. Hands are there full. So let's talk about our last topic here. In our conversation and doing the prep for the podcast, you had raised this concept of something you called a social cement and how technology can be used as a social cement. I'd never heard that before. I think it actually may be yours.
Comes from me. Yeah.
Yay! All right.
Yeah,
great, Mark.
Mine.
Social cement. Well, tell me what that means to you. What is technology as a social cement, and how does it relate to AI?
Yes, so fantastic question. So obviously, a social cement is a term to describe elements in a society that bring people together. So I know, I've forgotten his name. There was a philosopher that said pop music, for instance, brings people together. I'm sure a lot of people in society are brought together because of sport. They've got a common set of values, and they're then brought together on that basis. I'm very much a people person. So I remember doing my Clifton strengths test when I joined Accenture, and I had woo as one of the strengths. So winning others over. And that's very much about getting very excitable about people and also about making new connections with people. So I do go to a lot of tech events. And what always astounds me is that you've got a plethora of different stakeholders. You look at the Mobile World Congress, for instance, you've got maybe 70,000 people over 3 to 4 days from every country, from every background from a range of disciplines, but they're all coming together very much with a common goal or a common set of values to achieve something amazing with technology. So I do believe technology is very much a social cement. I gave the example of the call to Rome. So yeah, when Microsoft, FAO, IBM met the Pope. Yeah, so 3 Abrahamic religious leaders, a couple of other religious leaders there too. When else would you have that? When else would you have that group of stakeholders coming together to align on a common set of values? You probably wouldn't unless it was in tech. So I think that gets me very excited about tech. I remember having a bit of a Stephen, which probably brings me on to the next thread, which is multidisciplinary teams, and that you actually really need a multidisciplinary team if you're engaging with technologies now like generative AI. I remember it was when I was at Microsoft leading the data and AI partner ecosystem, and we just had that platform shift at the web. A lot of partners were beginning to use OpenAI on Azure, for instance, and they were doing hackathons to explore those initial use cases with their clients and even create them. And one of the partners went up to me and he said, "Yeah, Katharine, we've just done our first GenAI hackathon." And I said, "How did it go?" And he said, "It went really well." And we had a lawyer in the room. So they had a lawyer sitting in on that hackathon. And again, it's very much now about a multidisciplinary team. I see that every day at Avanade. I'm not in one solution area. I'm across a huge technology stack now. And I think, yeah, that platform shift and now paradigm shift has very much opened up this kind of multidisciplinary way of working, as well as this social cement that I like to do, like to call technology, I guess. I also think going forward, what can CDOs, I guess, take from this? I think if we're going to really excel and scale in this era, we need to work with multidisciplinary teams. We need to also be very inclusive about design. So there's a lot of out of the box thinking required. To really excel, I would say, in the age of GenAI. So that means also thinking about inclusive office space. So, for instance, neurodivergent colleagues, for instance, also can really bring their best to work, for instance, and come together, I guess, to build something exceptional.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end our conversation than on that note of optimism. I love it. I'm a believer. I think AI will do good things for society, and will help transform things and solve really, really difficult problems. And that means it's a great time to be in data and analytics. It's a great time to be a CDO. It's a great time to be partnered with Avanade. Thank you, Katharine, for taking an hour out of your busy day to share your knowledge with our listeners. It's been a thrill to have you. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very, very much, Malcolm.
With that, Happy New Year. Happy 2025, everybody. If you've made it this far and you haven't subscribed to the podcast, if you're not connected with me on LinkedIn or with Katharine on LinkedIn, please make the connection. I would happily get into discussions with you on LinkedIn. I'm posting almost every day content related to CDOs, data leaders, data stewards, data governors, you name it. If it's data related, I'm talking about it, and I would love to hear from you. With that, we will leave you for now. Please tune in to another episode of CDO Matters Podcast sometime very, very soon. Happy New Year. We'll see you all very soon. Thanks. Bye for now.